Well, hello there, motherfuckers. And I did a little short video yesterday, a little quick review of Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice. So I had a request to do a longer, in-depth video, and that's what I'm going to do here, pretty much. So right now, Dawn of Justice sits at a very, very, very surprising 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I addressed this in my first review. I didn't really understand why the critics. I'm still not completely sure why the critics are panning this movie. Now I see a lot of fans are also going along with the critics as well, not really giving any good reasons, attacking the plot, and saying that the movie is boring when it's. I can't believe these claims. I mean, like, I'm really shocked. I've never been this bewildered before. Now, I understood why people enjoyed Age of Ultron. Some people like the all-out action. They like the faithfulness to the comic to a certain extent. But the movie, as I said, Age of Ultron, to me was boring. I didn't like the lack of character development, the more of a focus on just CGI action and just doing some fan service, and throwing out different characters. It wasn't enough for me to warrant that this is a good movie. In fact, I thought it was a bad movie. I didn't enjoy it, and that movie is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, people who are not just Marvel fanboys, I'm a Marvel fan, but not a Marvel fanboy, and I do prefer the Marvel universe to the DC universe. And there's more recognizable characters, in my opinion, for the Marvel universe. I recognize those characters faster than I do in the DC universe. And the funny thing is that movie 75%, and the thing is with the 30%, and I see if you look in the little brief description of Rotten Tomatoes, and for people who are not familiar with Rotten Tomatoes, maybe you're not, maybe you don't really check that out too much on the web. It's a website that pretty much does an overall average of all the critiques and reviews throughout the internet and various newspapers. So, like Richard Roper and, anybody else, not really too familiar with specific critics, but whatever their names may be. Rotten Tomatoes is usually a pretty widely used source besides the Internet Movie Database, IMDb, um, for people to kind of judge, judging a book by its cover type of thing, where you pretty much get to see if the movie is worth your time or not, just by seeing what other people think of it. When really, I feel that the best method to go about knowing if a movie is good or not is to go see it for yourself. And there's been many times where a film has been panned. I go to see it and I enjoy it. Now, a lot of times, probably more times than not, the critics are more or less correct when they say a movie is really that bad. Because it's kind of like this. You can have an opinion on something, but sometimes your opinion could be wrong. I mean, people say that there's no way for an opinion to be wrong, um, because it's an opinion and it's open to interpretation. Well, anything is really open to interpretation when you really think about it. I mean, for God's sakes, you could even go outside on a sunny day and say that it looks horrible out. It is your opinion. You're entitled to think that it looks horrible out, but really, the fact will still remain. It is a fact that it pretty much is a nice day, or that would be popular opinion, or it would be a more accurate way of looking at things. So you see, anybody can really have an opinion. So that's fucking bullshit when they say that an opinion is just an opinion, and that we have to respect it. No, we don't have to respect shit. Especially when it's the opinion that's held about this movie. So I think people know that I pretty much disagree when it comes to what the critics feel and think about Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice. This movie does so many things correctly, and things that haven't been touched on before in other superhero movies, and just other movies in general. And for this all to be ignored is just insane. Now, it's been touched on in pretty much a lot of the reviews, but I think that they just didn't get it. Now, there's two ways of really looking at a review, or going about writing a review, or doing a spoken word review, like I and many other people do here on YouTube. You can review something based on your own personal opinion. You know, uh, that's more of a biased review, but that's my favorite type of review. I feel like if you're going to talk about something, talk from the heart, talk about how you feel. Now, other people do reviews sometimes, and this is on anything, even like video games or any other form of entertainment, where they feel like how they feel the public would receive something, and they will review it based on those merits, that how they feel that the public would receive it. So that kind of clears it of any biases, but it's very few and far between that a review comes out without any bias in it. So pretty much it's just better off to just review something based on how you feel about it. And that's exactly what I do. So, it either was that they just don't understand what this movie was trying to accomplish, or the critics are just completely out of touch with what the public thinks is a good movie or not. And it really, I think you people could see it really bothers me that 75% certified fresh by the critics for Age of Ultron. Man of Steel gets 56% on there. And it's just like they've completely lost their minds. And it really maybe makes me think that maybe Disney has fucking paid them off to review some of these fucking movies. Because you look at Age of Ultron, and honestly, even if you like Age of Ultron, do you really think that that movie is so much better than Batman versus Superman? I mean, really, be perfectly fucking honest. That movie didn't really have any plot besides Ultron trying to take over. They didn't even do that in a good fashion at all. I don't even really think it was that I don't even think it was that faithful to the comics, the way how they portrayed Ultron. To me, it seemed like a guy that was quite cowardly and didn't want to fight, and pretty much made his minions do all the work for him. And people argue with me and said, "Oh, that's what villains do." Not when you're Ultron, this all powerful being. No, that's a different story. So anyway, we're going to talk about some of the things that I really liked about this film, and maybe what might have pissed off some people in the media, because that's who's reviewing these movies, is the people in the media. And you got to keep in mind that that the a way that the media is now, they have jumped the shark a long time ago. They use an old classic phrase, and they are completely out of touch with reality and public opinion. And I really saw things like, for example, I was looking at reviews for Pee Wee's Big Holiday, something else that I reviewed here on YouTube. Go check out the review if you want. It was a movie that I gave a favorable review here on this channel, and people were saying things. They were getting involved in, like, saying like, oh, this is not how society really feels, and they started getting into things that I just couldn't even believe that they would discuss in a review about a Pee Wee Herman movie. And they got pretty political about it, from a socio political view. And it just showed me that the media, at least their their critics that work for the media, have completely lost their minds when they're actually doing that type of analysis for a Pee Wee Herman movie, a comedy film. So anyway, this movie gets into conspiracies, false flags, religion. It gets involved in the hope of humanity, and we really and we see evil taking over and almost winning here. And I kind of thought to myself, wow, this is a lot like what's going on right now in society. We have a lot of evil people that are trying to take over the country, trying to paint the heroes as evil, while the truly evil people are trying to prosper. Now, my political videos here on this channel have made me unpopular with certain audiences. A lot of people appreciate them, but there's a large audience where I kind of feel it's almost 50-50. At times, I think maybe that the my favorability rating when I talk about political shit on here goes even lower than of being unfavorable than too favorable. But I have to mention it here. I apologize. I don't want to get involved, especially when I just criticize the critics for doing it. But I have to say it. When I'm looking at a movie that has a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes and I loved it this fucking much, I've never seen a movie get this bad of a rating and love it this much. So I have to say that there's something else going on here that a lot of people are not realizing. Um, so there's a lot of things that the media wouldn't like here, especially false flags, which they do show in this movie, where Superman is going to save Lois Lane, and a bunch of people get killed in the surrounding area. But Superman's not responsible for it. In fact, it's actually Lex Luthor's son, Alexander Luthor, who made a whole entire setup conspiracy where he actually had his men kill those guys that Superman is being held responsible for killing or accidentally killing. So Superman is considered to be a threat now by certain groups in the country, and we see rallies against Superman. And I was like, wow, this is kind of like what we see in the media now on a day-to-day basis, huh? It seems kind of familiar, huh? Like we've seen this somewhere before. Yeah, in the media we see it. Not only that, but what I loved about this movie is the continuity between this and Man of Steel, and you really felt like Zack Snyder was making this, his own film franchise here, and really weaving it together like a fine tapestry. We see Bruce Wayne running through Gotham City, and we see these big explosions in the air. And I was like, kind of bewildered at first. I'm like, what's going on here? I didn't know what this was. And then I realized it's Superman versus Zod. And we're seeing the battle from the perspective of Bruce Wayne. And I was like, what a clever idea. And we see the Wayne Enterprises building get destroyed. And then we see in the rubble that there's this guy who ends up losing his legs, has to get his legs amputated because the rubble falls right on top of him. And we see Bruce Wayne right away considers Superman to be a menace, hurting one of his employees, destroying one of his buildings. And we see throughout the movie that Lex Luthor actually orchestrates the fight between Superman and Batman, giving it a reason for existing. We see that he even goes so far as to kidnap Superman's mother, Martha, and actually uses her as a tool in saying that if Superman doesn't kill Batman, then Martha's going to die. And of course, tensions have already risen between Batman and Superman. And when we do see the fight, it is well worth the wait. And people are actually saying that this movie does not have good action scenes. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You really have to be fucking kidding me to say that this movie does not have good action scenes. The Batman and Superman fight, the Doomsday fight, and all the other action scenes on top of that. And they're also memorable as well. Better choreographed than what we saw in a movie like Age of Ultron, which was just explosion, explosion, craziness, and nothing memorable at all. And we get something completely different than that. Something more refined. Something a bit more tasteful. And of course, no surprise, it gets panned. So we also see Superman going into court as well in this movie, being tried for being a danger to society, and we see one senator has it out for him, and we see just like public opinion and different people's perspectives on Superman. Is he a danger? He's a vigilante. And, these are things we've seen also. If you watch Daredevil season two, we see something similar there. It's like an interesting perspective. These are vigilantes. And it really is. It very, very much harkens back to reality, where we even see, our own military being scrutinized by the media and other, political pundits and things like that. People that were once perceived as heroes are now considered to be villains. And, seeing this, I think, kind of upset the media quite a bit. I don't think they like it. So I think that what they did is they had their critics scrutinize this movie and say that it was bad, because we really see that in the end, evil doesn't prosper, even though they're so close to taking over by trying to manipulate different things, trying to manipulate the fate of the hero in Superman and Batman. And basically, what he's trying to do is just make everything go his way. Alexander Luthor is trying to make everything go his way, so it will lead to the fall of Superman and Batman. And that was really an interesting way of going about things. It was a very, very not. It was a complex plot to a point, but not overly complex. It was understandable. I understood what was going on. Even though there was a lot of different layers to this plot and Alexander Luthor's plot to take over. Now, also the religious aspect. This is something that had been associated with Superman. We've seen different people analyze this, but there's this one scene where we see Superman, and I believe it's in another country. He saves this little girl, brings her back to her parents, and we see it's just a group of people surrounding Superman, reaching out, touching him, or trying to touch him with their hands outreach. It was almost like what people do in the Pulp visits their location, or if it was like Jesus Christ, came back and down to earth, and people were standing before him. You really felt like Superman was a special individual being heralded as almost a god, and that's basically what I mentioned when I was saying the fight between Zod and Superman was a battle of gods. I mean, really, that you felt like in that scene, Superman was something special. He meant something to the people, and we see this theme is constantly repeated, and it's a religious undertone. You could say maybe it's an overtone to a point, but it's not really shoved down your throat. We see another great scene between during the fight between Batman and Superman, where Batman knocks Superman down a shaft. He lands with arms spread. It's almost like a crucifix. And I just liked a lot of those little subtle touches. But once again, these religious aspects, the media is not a big fan of religion, and they go to great lengths to try to knock it down, and I think that's also what kind of pissed them off a little bit, and they didn't like it, and that's why they said this plot was all over. The thing is, this movie was not all over the place. If you want to talk about a movie that's all over the place, try to convince me that Age of Ultron was not all over the place. This plot, it was way more steady. It stood on its own 2 feet and it accomplished a lot, and we got to know the characters. By the end of the movie, when Superman perishes at the hands of Doomsday, I'll admit the movie had my eyes watering. I thought that it was a really sad scene, and it spoke to me on an emotional level, which I've said this many times before. If a movie can do that, I'm considering it to be good. People are also knocking Doomsday. I will say that I will admit that he's probably not the best looking interpretation of Doomsday we could have possibly got. He does start growing the bones throughout the fight. Probably not enough bones. I know that he's not gonna be dead in the next film. He's gonna come back. But it's probably not the best interpretation of the character. I wish that they would have made him more faithful to the comic. But to say that the fight wasn't good, and many people making out like Doomsday kind of went out like a bitch, which would be totally inaccurate when we see pretty much 20 to 25 minutes dedicated to Doomsday. So really, at the end of the day, or the end of the movie, I was pretty satisfied by the fight. I mean, it felt epic. It was memorable. They didn't just rush through it and just fill it up with a bunch of explosions and just a lot of genericness. No, it actually felt like a special fight. And I was happy to finally see this fight actually taking place. Instead of it being bland, it felt special. Um, and those are a lot of great things that I just named about this movie. And as far as flaws, there's really nothing that I could figure out. And of course, many people were concerned about the biggest flaw of this movie being that Ben Affleck was going to be a terrible Batman. In fact, I even did a video back in 2014, I think the beginning of the year, when they revealed Ben Affleck in the Batman suit and all that. It was a weird looking photo, and you know I talked a little bit about how I thought Ben Affleck being Batman was a bad idea. Now the thing was, everybody likes to go back and talk about Daredevil from 2003. That was a horrible movie, and rightfully so. It was one of the worst superhero movies I've probably ever seen. um you know Ghost Rider is right up there with it. The first Fantastic Four movie, I didn't see the new one that came out last year. Probably will never watch it, unless anybody out there wants to see a review of that. But it would have to be a lot of people willing to want to watch that video, because I don't want to see that movie. But if a lot of people want to see me review it, I will actually sit through it. Um, and the thing is that Ben Affleck knocks it out of the park. And the thing is, I'm not a big fan of Ben Affleck. I've only seen a couple of movies where I enjoyed it that he's starred in, and of course everybody likes to go Argo, and that's their response to anything, because I didn't see Argo, but apparently he puts a pretty good performance forward in that film. Um, and so I'm not saying that he's a bad actor, but he's an actor that a lot of times leaves a lot to be desired. So I was with the majority on that the Ben Affleck was going to be a bad Batman, or had concerns that he was going to be a bad Batman or bad Bruce Wayne. And he knocks it out of the park. It's a good performance, and there's nothing I could really complain about. When I saw him sitting there in the Batcave as Bruce Wayne, or just really watching the opening sequence with him running through the city, observing the fight between Superman and Zod, I immediately took to him. I was like, "That's Bruce Wayne." And that was more than I could have hoped for. I thought that I was going to have to struggle, repeated viewings to try to appreciate him as Bruce Wayne, or I might not have even taken to him at all. So I was pretty happy that at the end of course, it's crucial that and the actor playing one of the main characters actually, would be favorable, and he is. So I really fail to see what the concern is. That's one of the major concerns, has been pretty much done away with. It's been debunked that that he's going to be a bad Batman. Certain people are still going with that, and honestly, if you thought that Ben Affleck was bad in this movie, I mean, I don't know what to say to you. If you thought that was a bad performance, or why was it a bad performance? I really want to know here in the comments. And I want to know if you really think that this movie deserved the 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. I really want to know exactly why you thought that. I thought this movie delivered uh, in terms of plot, in terms of character development. I mean, this really delved deep into the Superman mythos. And what I was really happy about is that we didn't have to go back and see these, the origin stories for 1,000 fucking times. We see it briefly with Bruce Wayne in the beginning of the movie, but they're already Superman and Batman. We didn't have to see them becoming them for the millionth time, and we got to see things that we've never seen before, thought we were never going to see before in a movie starring either of these characters. And the movie did them both justice. No pun intended there. Um, and I really thought that this movie kind of deserved around the rating that Age of Ultron has on Rotten Tomatoes. I'd say switch those two around, and you've got a pretty accurate representation of those films. Age of Ultron was very lazy filmmaking. This was crafted very well. I'm a big fan of Zack Snyder, big fan of his art direction, big fan of his directing style. I like that he makes these movies very dark. No cheesy jokes. Jesse Eisenberg as Alexander Luthor. That is the comic relief pretty much in this film. But it's not gonna really like leave you with the giggles. I mean, it's more of him just being insane, and he says some entertaining lines, but it's not like funny. There's no hanging out in a bar, acting goofy or anything like that. No, this is a movie with a very serious tone. It feels very much like Batman is supposed to feel, having that serious dark tone, and the tone that Man of Steel set, which was also pretty damn dark. So I'm failing to really realize what people hate about this film. I think that the media was a little bit pissed off by some of the more political aspects of this film. That's personally what I think and what I'm kind of getting from it. I don't think that they like the false flags and the conspiracy and the questioning of heroes, and trying to paint heroes in a negative light, and all the religious aspects. I've noticed that a lot of times critics have become a lot like the actual articles in the newspaper that concern politics and other social issues. I think they've gotten corrupted by that, and I think what they wanted was probably a more politically correct film. I think they wanted a film that kind of fit their interests more. I don't think that they liked the direction of this movie. And I don't know the complete specifics about it, but I'm going to try to analyze this film. I'm going to see this movie for a second time, and I'm gonna probably do a follow up video about what I think about this movie from a second time. I'm really gonna start, looking at some of the nuances of this film, certain things that I might have missed, from the first viewing. But anyway, guys, leave comments. Let me know what you liked and disliked about this film. If you really truly hated it, video responses are also welcome, which is something I never really mentioned here before. I mentioned in the previous video when I addressed somebody. It was a political video that I did on here. If you guys want to make video responses to me, I'm more than open to going back and forth. I'm not a big fan of the Google Hangouts. I don't really do that. So let me know, guys, what you thought about this film. And yeah, uh, I'll do more videos on this topic if anybody wants to discuss it more. If you want to question me on specific things about this film, what I did and did not like. I mean, it kind of sounds crazy that the media would be so biased about a superhero movie, but hey, I don't put anything past them. All right, motherfuckers.